Hello and welcome. My name is Joseph Johnson. I serve as the Executive Director of the National Center for Urban School Transformation, INCUST. Since 2005, INCUST has been identifying amazing elementary, middle, and high schools that generate great learning results for all demographic groups of students. Not surprisingly, we found the same impressive teaching practices throughout these schools. In our current situation, we need to find ways to apply those essential teaching practices in remote learning environments to ensure equity and excellence for all students we have the privilege to serve. We believe the teaching practices we've witnessed in INCUST award-winning schools can be applied in ways that make online learning more powerful and more effective for diverse populations of students. While our nation should applaud educators for their amazing efforts to adapt quickly to the realities of the pandemic, we know students did not benefit equitably. Emergency remote teaching is not the same as well-planned distance learning. To that end, we're pleased to introduce you to our Equity, Excellence, and E-Learning webinar series, which highlights each practice in the book, Teaching Practices from America's Best Urban Schools, 2nd edition, and discusses practical ways educators can apply them in online instructional delivery. You know, in all likelihood, the authors of the textbooks used in your school never had the honor of meeting the students you serve. Those authors undoubtedly knew their subject matter, but they may have weak notions about how to help you and your colleagues get your students to relate to the subject matter. The examples, illustrations, problems, and situations described in their products may have been written for a very different demographic group. In contrast, in the high-performing schools we have studied and awarded, we find teachers who are constantly working together to find ways to adapt, modify, or supplement curricular material so the students they serve will have aha moments when they realize, oh, I know about this. This makes sense to me. The aha moment represents the priceless transition from confusion to understanding, from being a disengaged bystander to becoming an active participant in learning. By ensuring culturally, socially, and personally responsive teaching, educators in high-performing schools multiply the likelihood that their students will experience those aha moments. In today's session, we'll focus on the practice of ensuring culturally, socially, and personally responsive teaching, even in times when we are engaged in e-learning. And we have a wonderful opportunity to see how educators in a spectacular urban school, Concourse Village Elementary School, are constantly trying to help students make connections with new, challenging content. And we'll hear about how educators are utilizing literature, and they're utilizing music, and they're utilizing video in a way that's helping construct or illuminate bridges that help students connect their backgrounds, their prior knowledge, their culture, their experiences to the new concepts, ideas, and skills they're trying to teach their students. Even ambitious, rigorous, challenging, abstract concepts and skills. So we are so pleased to bring this session to you today. We're so fortunate to have an amazing team of educators from Concourse Village Elementary School in New York City to share with us today. There is so much great material for us to cover today, so let's get started. I'm pleased to introduce our moderator today, Dr. Rupi Boyd, InCust Executive Coach, a former teacher, principal, district leader, and superintendent. We're so pleased to have Dr. Boyd facilitate today's session.
Thank you, Joe. It's wonderful to be here to provide the support to fellow educators and administrators. Today, we're fortunate to have with us outstanding principal and teachers from one of our InCust America's Best Urban School Gold Award winner, Concourse Village Elementary School in Bronx, New York. Like all of our award winners, Concourse Village Elementary School has achieved multiple impressive successes for every demographic group they serve. For example, African-American students outperformed the overall average of all students in New York on the state's rigorous assessment. We are pleased to have with us today, Miss Alexa Sorden, the principal and the founding principal, Miss Cindy Garcia, second grade social studies teacher, Miss Katie Casares, assistant principal and STEM teacher. To echo Joe's sentiments, teaching practice we observed over and over again in diverse high-performing schools are still relevant and need to be adapted to all learning environments. Our session today is in the companion to our blog, Hey, I know about this. Now this makes sense. In chapter 4 of the book, Teaching Practices from America's Best Urban School, which focuses on ensuring culturally, socially, personally responsive teaching. We'll discuss what this teaching practice entails and practical approaches for teachers to implement it in an online instructional delivery model, as well as how school leaders can be of support. More than any other factor, InCust has found compelling evidence that students are likely to perform at high levels when teachers ensuring culturally, socially, personally responsive teaching, primarily by utilizing instructional materials that connects to students' background, prior knowledge, culture, and experience with new concepts, ideas, and skills. Students are much more likely to thrive academically when synchronous and asynchronous lessons are designed, not merely to follow a district pacing guide, but to maximize each student's personal and cultural strengths, accomplishments, and experience. In order for e-learning experience to be meaningful to students, teachers should plan to provide culturally, socially, and personally responsive teaching in their daily lesson. Alexa, we are in uncharted territory, and before we discuss the teaching practice, would you please share with us the instructional format you're currently using to teach at your school?
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you for having us. So currently, our school is implementing a hybrid model, which means we have 3 cohorts of students. We have cohort A, which comes to school Monday through Wednesday. Cohort B, which comes to school Thursday and Friday. And cohort C, which is fully remote. So our teachers are scheduled to provide in-person and remote teaching. So our teachers actually do both. They have in-person groups, and then within their schedules, they also provide synchronous instruction to students that are fully remote. In addition, they also record asynchronous sessions for students to watch if they are not able to make it to their synchronous lessons. Also, so that children have the option of self-pacing their own learning, and so that students that are in cohort A, when they're not in school Thursday and Friday, they also have access to the curriculum on those days as well. So that is our current instructional model.
Thank you, Alexa. Thank you for providing that overview. So that gives our listeners an idea of how this whole setup is working. Cindy, you're currently teaching classes remotely. How do you incorporate culturally, socially, personally responsive teaching into your e-learning class with your students? Can you give us a few examples? What resources would you recommend to others who hope to accomplish this in their classroom?
Sure. Hello, everyone. So every morning, I greet all of my students. Remotely, I'll post a morning message video where I shout out a scholar for perfect attendance or share an exemplar assignment they completed. In our live Zoom sessions as well, they're able to have the opportunity to greet each other. With the students I meet in person, I have several options for them. They can select either having a foot shake, air hugs, high fives, air high fives, or peace signs. So that's a way to start their day. For all groups, we review our flow of the day prior to beginning our school day. And this gives students awareness of what they will be working on. After our morning greet and message, scholars recite the CVES Scholars Creed of Integrity. And this allows them to reflect and serves as a reminder of they need to follow the school's core values. So integrity, perseverance, optimism, willingness, empathy, and respect. So they are reminded that they don't only show the core values in the classroom, but also when they work remotely at home. Lastly, we end our morning routines, starting our day big and in a positive way by meditating. This allows our scholars to improve their comprehension, release any stress and anxiety they have from the morning or during the week. So these morning routines are daily, and this helps our scholars transition smoothly into their lesson for the day. In my classroom, they organize the tables into careers. So for example, each table is either a lawyer, educator, architect, or doctor. And this allows scholars to work collaboratively and show more independence. So in each table, they have a group representative, and each group representative is able to gather materials they need for their groups. So they're held accountable to make sure that the table are working collaboratively. We also have a music manager who plays the music when students go off to work independently or in their stations. We have a group facilitator who facilitates whole group discussions. So that is prior to beginning our lesson. So they're able to know their roles as a student.
May I add? Sorry, may I add to that, Cindy?
Yeah, sure.
I love that you mentioned all the roles. At our school, it was really important to name in grades pre-K to 2, we named every table after a profession. And our goal with that was to provide exposure to our scholars of the many different professions that exist. So in Cindy's class, she mentioned she has lawyers, educators, what else do you have, Cindy?
Architects, doctors.
Doctors. So like in the science classroom, the teacher may have archaeologists, zoologists, different careers, because we wanted to give our children options. And when they transition to the 3rd grade, from 3rd to 5th grade, they're named after universities. And they learn about those universities and the different majors that are offered at that university. So then they start putting it together. So they're like, all these years I've been learning about these various careers. And now when I get to 3rd grade, I see the college or university choices that I have. So what our goal with that was to be able to give our students the language that they needed to be able to articulate the possible careers that they could have. And where the schools are located that they could potentially attend. And when we play the music for the scholars, one of the things we did as a community was research. So the music manager will play classical music while our children are working so that they could be able to hone in and just listen to the tune. And we usually play Mozart or Beethoven. And that's just intentional to help them be able to retain a lot of the information that they're getting. And I know Cindy mentioned BIG, and BIG is an acronym. So at our school, we start the day with breathing deeply. That's the B part. And then we initiate our intentions for the day. And then we get ready to have a great learning session. And like Cindy said, the whole point of that is so that the children can get centered and focused. And that's like our way of saying, like, how are we engaging with them in a personal way so that they're able to just like, okay, just let's bring ourselves together. We're about to transition into math. And now what does, you know, like, what does that feel like? And what are your intentions for this math session? And we decided that as a school community because we wanted to give them mindfulness activities that they could carry with them throughout life. So that's why that's so important. Thank you for mentioning that, Cindy.
Yes, thank you. So once we are transitioned to our lesson, I begin with a question in connection to what they will be working on. So using students' background knowledge helps me understand what they know and what they are curious to know more about. Last module, we read a novel, Make Way for Diamond Daniel. And before reading a chapter, I would pose a question in connection to what they will be reading about. So an example of that is that we had a chapter where the character introduces to her new neighborhood. So a question that I asked was, what kinds of businesses do you see or you can find in your neighborhood? So the scholars were able to share out and also get to know each other's neighborhood. Oh yeah, I have supermarkets or laundromats. And that was prior for them reading the chapter. Also, as a form of rereading, so once they reread, we interacted with that lesson. The next day, they reread with a purpose of comparing and contrasting their neighborhood with the character's neighborhood. So again, making that connection as they are engaging in the text. The resources that we used were ReadWorks. They made text-to-text connections with other fictional texts in which characters are new to a school or neighborhood. So that also had a perfect way for them to understand what they were reading. This month, we began our 3 types of communities module, and it was a perfect connection to Making Way for Diamond Daniel because they were able to notice, oh wait, Diamond Daniel's neighborhood was crowded, had so many businesses like ours. What type of community that is? So again, helping them understand what an urban community is. So as you see that all the modules have some sort of connection, which is really important for them. So I posted to launch the communities module, I posted a photograph of Times Square, and they were able to ask themselves questions. Where are the people going? Why are there so many people there? And that's also another connection into learning about urban communities. So all these connections help them to better understand and making sure they're interacting with the content. Resources that we have been using for our module is Flocabulary. They love the song Rural, Suburban, and Urban Communities. It's a song in Flocabulary, and they're singing it. We sing it prior to beginning our lesson, and that encourages them more to understand the vocabulary within the module, such as suburbs or population. So that's a great opportunity for them to develop vocabulary. We also plan our lessons on Nearpod, and Nearpod has this really cool feature where they're able to explore a community virtually, have a virtual field trip. So in this case, we cannot take them to Times Square, but they're able to usually go to Nearpod and have that experience there too. So using these great resources have kept our scholars engaged and wanting to learn more. We want to make it a smooth, fun, and interactive experience through these difficult times for them.
Wow, Cindy, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all these resources. Katie, I know you're doing a dual role this year, so would you please share with us what kinds of things are you using and to make sure students are connecting and making sure the lessons are engaging?
Yes, thank you for having me. I do want to start with saying a lot of the morning routines that Ms. Garcia mentioned, so big, and the greetings, as well as giving students opportunities to kind of greet each other during the Zoom class as well. I do the exact same thing. So that's followed by all educators. This way students have that consistency throughout each class with each teacher throughout the years, and they know that is not going to change. That's always how we start our class. So we do the same thing, kind of get them motivated and ready for the lesson coming up. In my classroom, one of the first things I do to make sure my kids are connected is I refer to them as engineers, coders, and scientists. So depending on the lesson and the activity or the module that we're doing, that'll determine which name they have. But it's important for them to know that that is who they are and that they are capable in the future of fulfilling those roles if that's the career that they want to choose. I also want them to be aware that even though maybe they haven't realized it, they are engineers, because engineers solve problems that help make our lives a little easier. And if they've ever tried to fix a toy or make something out of a box for their doll or something to play in, well, you've engineered something. So it's important for them to know that they're already doing it. I also do plugged and unplugged lessons. And that is important because it's essential for them to know that engineering, designing, being a scientist is not always about technology. You're capable of doing all this with different materials and in a different way. You don't always have to be on a device or on an iPad. And I found that they really do enjoy the unplugged activities because they get to kind of interact with how to make an algorithm doing dance moves. So we create a code for a certain dance move. They create a code for each dance move, and then they can then put it together, and that's an algorithm. They've just coded an algorithm that they can give to a peer, and now the peer has to try out that algorithm as well. And they're learning with coding and don't necessarily have to have an iPad in front of them. And I found that they then go home and they're now sharing this with their siblings or their parents, and they're excited to show them, like, look at what we did in school today. And now that's carried along with them, and they don't need anything physical. We don't have to give them, like, send them home with materials, which is exciting for them as well. With STEAM activities, as we started to do more of the remote learning, something that I wanted to make sure I was very thoughtful is what materials might a child have at home, because I still wanted them to be able to create and build, but I also know they're not in my classroom where I can make sure I purchased or I brought in every material they might need. So we started working on open-ended challenges where it was, I need you to create, we were learning about forces, push and pull. So now that we've read a book, we've learned about the push force and pull force. I want you in your home to create a game using push and pull force. I didn't tell them what materials they had to use. I didn't tell them, I tried to keep it very open-ended. And what ended up happening is that they got very creative. And I was really excited and happy to see what the kids were able to do with this very open-ended response. And I had students using laundry bins and rolling chairs to create a game. And they posted a video of me playing with mom and this racing game. And it allowed them to explore. It also gave them time to have fun time with their parents, but they're also showing their parents or their siblings or grandparents what they learned. Hey, I learned about push and pull. This is my game. And now they're recording themselves playing the game and sending it to me. And they don't even realize that they're truly showing what they know about the concept, because for them, it's fun, which is what learning should be. It should be fun. Within the classroom, we have very open seating. So we have a rug where kids can choose to sit on the floor. We have a table, a dry erase table. They can choose to go to the dry erase table and work there. Some kids like to stand. And if you want to stand while we're learning, I'm going to go ahead and let you stand as long as we're getting the work done. So I think it's also about kind of being flexible with your students and understanding that not everybody learns the same way, and gone are the days where everyone just has to sit in front of the same desk in the same chair and learn the exact same way. If one kid wants to sit on a bouncy chair, another one is okay with a regular plastic chair, then that's how we learn best. And I think that also gives them that ability to be more comfortable and just open-minded. It's those little things that give them that comfort that allow them to open up and be who they are, who the student or the scholar that they are. We have rubrics. We've created rubrics. I created it along with our other STEAM teacher, and we sat down and we made rubrics that were tailored for our younger scholars and then tailored for our older scholars, because the rubric is not for me. I mean, I use it to kind of gauge, to make sure I have a goal for them, but the rubric is especially for them. They need to be able to look at it and see, hey, this is my end goal, and these are all the steps I have. This is everything I need to have in order to get a 4 on this assignment. That's essential for them, because I think just telling them, hey, we're going to be creating, building a home, and that's it. It doesn't give them that purpose. They need to understand why. We even share the standards with them, and we tell them, hey, this is the standard we're working towards. Here are all the things we have to know. Here are all the steps we're going to take. And that allows them to take ownership of their learning. As far as resources, we use Scratch and Scratch Junior in the classroom, and at home students have access to it. With Scratch, an educator can make a student's account, and that is free. You can monitor what the students are doing and the different projects they're working on. With Scratch Junior, it is easier for our younger scholars to use, from pre-K to about first, second. The only thing with Scratch Junior is it's a little more open and you can't make individual students' accounts. But hopefully that will change. That'll be an upgrade in the future. However, they do work very well for coding, and the kids really do enjoy both of those resources. Within the classroom, we have Little Bits and we have Kibo. Both of those explore coding. Kibo I like especially because it's a physical block. And on the block, you see the code, whether it's a U arrow to signify like your robot's gonna make a U-turn, or straight, left, right. It's very visual for your younger students. So they can actually take these blocks, put them together. Now they're making an algorithm, they're making steps in order to help get their Kibo is the robot, in order to get their Kibo robot from one side of the room to the other, or to get their robot complete a goal that maybe I had given them. And they're literally putting the blocks together, scanning it, and then they put the robot down, and it does exactly what they said. And that's a good way to introduce that coding to our younger students who need the physical touch and who need to see and really feel and understand what coding is. We also have Codeorg, which we use. Codeorg is another free resource. So any educator can go online, make their own account, and then make classroom accounts for each student. And that monitors the students' progress and allows them to create challenges along the way as they learn different codes. And then at the end, they're actually building up to a bigger project where maybe they're creating a story, or if you as a teacher want to link their bigger project to something else they're doing in another class. So for example, Ms. Garcia spoke about urban, suburban, and rural communities. Our end project could be that you're going to code a little story where you show a character moving through different communities. Another resource we use that I truly enjoy is Generation Genius. Generation Genius provides videos of, it's very similar to Bill Nye the Science Guy, but a little more modern. And what I think our kids, they truly love the videos. And it's a scientist, and he works with 2 younger kids, and they're completing different challenges that are all based on the next generation science standards. It's aligned with next generation science standards. And that is perfect, because if this is the standard I'm working on, I can then go on Generation Genius, look up that exact standard, and it has a video, a child-friendly video, where kids can get about a 10-minute description where they're showing what the concept is. The kids are completing some type of challenge or experiment, and then it ends it with a song. And I found that especially the little ones, they love the song at the end. Along with those resources, I always just try to make sure that I find books or picture books, different texts that I know my kids can relate to. It's very important that they see themselves in these careers, that they see themselves reflected in these careers that many people have that before maybe they didn't see people like them doing. So I started off this year by reading I Promise, the book, a picture book written by LeBron James. And in that book, it just has the students affirm that anything you need in order to be successful, you have it within you. And we ended that with having the students I want you to make a promise to yourself as to what you're going to do. What are you going to promise yourself in order to help you be successful this year? Especially because everything is not what it was. It's also different. So what is the promise that you can make to yourself in order to help you be successful? And just know that this is not for me, it's not for mom, it's not for dad, it's for you. And whatever you promise yourself, you are capable and you have everything you need in order to be successful.
Thank you so much, Katie and Cindy. You guys have done an amazing job sharing these resources. I love the part about flexible seating, because as students come back to school, that's something that's going to have to be in the forefront, because for the last year, they've been doing flexible seating at home. Principal Alexa, you and your instructional team have had some time to rethink and refine your approaches to online learning for this school year. Would you share how you plan to support your staff as they work to incorporate new strategies into their online instructional delivery to ensure teachers at Concourse Village Elementary continue their focus?
So one of the things as the school leader that is really important for me to pay attention to is funding. So wherever I can secure funding for professional development, and professional development that's also mirroring what we are expecting of our students. So one of the platforms that I use is Otis Tech, TEQ, and that allows our teachers to receive professional development that's differentiated. So they select what they want to get better in. They're able to do this in the convenience of their own home. They also are able to get certification, and they get CTLE credits, which supports state recommendations for their professional learning hours. Also providing them with the online software that they need to be successful. So making those purchases so that they are able to create lessons that are the asynchronous lessons that are really motivating and engaging for students. Also at-home materials where it makes sense for our children. So once our teachers are able to plan out their module and see what students that are at home would need, we're able to purchase those resources so that our children could pick it up at the school so that they have it at home as well. When Katie and Cindy mentioned habits that we have as a school community. So in terms of how we interact with students in person and online, we do that as in a school-wide, we do it as a school-wide approach. And when we decided to approach this as a school, it was about children. We didn't want our children to have to relearn different systems for different teachers every single day when life can be already stressful as it is. We didn't want to create any unknowns for our children that didn't have to exist. So when our children come online or in person to school, their day is predictable and they know exactly what to expect. We share school-wide best practices throughout our community. Virtually, we share that. We share videos of teachers engaging in best practices, or I'll provide a tip of the day. We ensure that students have student voice and choice, and that's something that makes its way into our instructional planning. So how are we creating more opportunities for student choice? Currently, we are unpacking project-based learning throughout our entire math curriculum from grades pre-K to 5. And we chose math because we found that it lends itself to many real-world opportunities, and for reasons where math, historically, when we become older, when we become adults, we don't tend to perform well in those areas, and we don't tend to not have careers that reflect a need in math. So we wanted to create more opportunities in math for our children from pre-K to 5, where they're engaging in project-based learning, so that they could see math in every day. Whether it's like, how much paint do I need to paint? You know, how many gallons of paint do I need for this room? How many tiles will I need to purchase? Or what's the square footage on this house, and how much will it cost me? So creating real world situations for them to interact with in math. And then when all of this happens, it starts to happen for us April to April. We are fully aware of what happens to us as human beings, as educators, when the month of May comes, right after Memorial Day. I don't know what happens to us, but we are definitely fatigued, and planning PDs or anything in June doesn't seem to be the most commonsensical approach for leadership, at least not in my 21 years of experience. So we take April to April. You know, spring is in the air, folks are still motivated. What does our school look like April to April every year? And then how do we maximize May and June to push our scholars to the next level, and thinking about potential summer loss for some, which can happen. So how do we take those 2 months to really push the envelope and take them to the next grade level? So if I'm a 3rd grade teacher, how is my instruction reflecting 4th grade standards during the month of May and March, so that I could already start exposing my children to what the 4th grade would look like, going back to what Cindy shared at the onset, prior knowledge, which a lot of research supports is important for children and helps them retain learning. So the other thing that I'm responsible for is scheduling, and being really smart about what does scheduling look like for educators and our students. So the same way that our students need to get centered and focused, our teachers need that as well. So how am I still ensuring that they're teaching in person and remote? How am I ensuring that in the schedule, they have their normal prep time, which is 50 minutes per day, in addition to another 80 minutes per day for them to also plan, meet with one another, and connect with families. So I have to ensure that educators have time for planning with their colleagues, time for reviewing student work, time for connecting with families. So another approach that we took as a school to make sure that we were able to manage all of the demands that our educators currently have is, how can we make that happen? We opted to be departmentalized. So our 2nd through 5th grade mirrors what a middle school or high school would look like. So Cindy, for example, is our ELA social studies expert. So she's the humanities educator. And then she's on a team with a science and math teacher. And something that Cindy also mentioned was she's currently in a 3 types of community module. So what does that look like in math? So she and her grade teacher planned a lesson to what would building a home look like. So what does that, the math teacher was able to take that lesson and say, okay, so students are going to create their own homes. What are the measurements they will need? How big will the windows be? Are they going to add electricity to these homes? So now they had to create the plan, just like what Katie mentioned, like how are we making a plan for building these communities that I'm learning about in ELA and social studies. So as a school overall, we do our very best to bridge all the connections throughout the day, because that is one way that we decrease stress for our educators and for our children and for our families. So once they see that everything is interconnected, they all start to see how the puzzle comes together, and there they find the purpose in learning. And I also want to mention something that Katie said when she talked about coding. I wanted to go back to that. As educators, it is our responsibility. So when I think about being socially responsive, I think about how the tech field is growing. And when we think about what will the world look like in 10 years from now, and knowing that we are located in the poorest congressional district in the nation, which means nothing to achievement, because we've proven that maybe we have those stats because financially we are currently at the poorest congressional district. However, it doesn't determine how far our thinking can go and how far our achievement can go. So exposing them to coding and our scholars learning the language of coding allows them to have the knowledge they need, that as they evolve as young learners and future coders, that they feel confident, like, I know this language, I've been exposed. So if our parents don't have the means to get them a after school program or another extracurricular activity, we are making sure that we're socially responsive and being responsible to expose our children to those pathways so that we give them the edge that they need to be globally competitive.
What I'm wanting is for you, Principal Sorden, to share a little bit about how teachers at Concourse Village plan the literature that your students will read. And in particular, I've heard you mention previously about how they will make those literature selections in ways that help ensure that children will read positive examples where there are characters who look like them.
So as I said before, from April to April, we engage in planning. And during this time, one of the things we look at is the literature choices we're making for our scholars. So as early as kindergarten, our students are exposed to chapter books. And this becomes part of our novel studies, which begins from K all the way through 5th grade. So in kindergarten, our students read Freckle Juice. And we chose Freckle Juice, aside from it being a Judy Blume classic, but we chose it because in there, the character is in search for freckles. And he just wants these freckles, but ultimately he learns to just love himself and to be happy with who he is. And that's something that we want our scholars to see, that just love yourself and be happy with who you are. When they get to 1st grade, they'll read Magic Finger. And we chose Magic Finger because we see a child take a stance on something that is wrong. She finds out that her neighbors are hunting ducks. And she's very appalled by this. And she uses her magic finger to teach empathy. And that's one of the things that we want to highlight. How do we teach empathy, and how can we have an impact in our own community? While Magic Fingers, actually, it's obviously a fictional text, we want to let them know, like, how can you have the magic finger to make a change in your community, which supports the idea of engineering and problem solving that they would see in coding class with Katie. Then in 2nd grade, they start the school year with 2 Diamond Daniel books, and it's written by Nikki Grimes, who is a Black author. At this time, because they're 7 and 8, they're transitioning, they're more aware now of who they are. They're starting to pick up on it. And we wanted to introduce an author that most likely has characters that most likely resemble them, because now they really start to notice. So we start the year with Diamond Daniels, who lives in a community similar to theirs, who's an excellent student and who encounters different issues. She's actually dealing with a divorce, and her parents she moved to a new neighborhood and a new home. So we're able to see how these characters are responding to challenges in their lives and how they overcome it. So we're utilizing these texts intentionally to give them an example of how we could do this as human beings. We can do what the characters did as well. Then they transition into Charlotte's Web, which is a traditional text and one that we want them to read for empathy as well, but to also see another culture, another community, which ties back into the 3 types of communities that Cindy was also referring to. So once they learn about a rural community, then they see this in Charlotte's Web, and they start to see all the characteristics and features that make up a rural community. But while they're going through that, they're learning about friendship. They're learning about loyalty. They're learning about respect. They're learning about also how Fern, got my novels confused, how Fern in the beginning also takes a stand. So they're starting to see that children are able to use their voice. And that's something that means everything to me, because I came from the same exact community, but I was told to be quiet and just do as I'm told, because that's what good kids do. And we want our kids to know good kids speak up, good kids have opinions that are backed up by data, right? So we teach our kids that early. Then they end second grade with My Name is Maria Isabel. And we chose that book because now, going back to what I said, they're really starting to get to, this is who I am. And we wanted to add strength to what your name is and how no one should change your name. If they cannot pronounce it, they should practice. But your name is important and it comes from somewhere. So we see Maria Isabel go through the story of how she got her name and how it was a generational name passed down by her grandmother and great-grandmothers, and how no one, not even the teacher in the story, is allowed to change your name because your name is who you are. When they get to third grade, they meet Opal and because of Winn-Dixie. And there we also see Opal struggling with the fact that she doesn't have her mom, and she's also living in a new community, and how she finds friendship through her dog, Winn-Dixie, and then everything that she encounters. So again, we see another character responding to different challenges in their lives. Then they read Felita, which takes place in the late 60s, 70s. And this is, in third grade, they actually unpack a human rights module, which then supports Felita, the novel, where the character is called the N-word and is also called a spick. And she sees herself outside of her Latin community when she moves into a new community, and how she encounters racism and how she learns a lot from that experience. And that's a topic that we wanted our children to start talking about very young, because it then connects back to who am I, what are my rights, and how am I advocating for myself. Then when they get to fourth grade, they read Tiger Rising. And here again, you see another character, Rob, who's also struggling without having his mom, who passed away, which we learned at the beginning of the story. And he also encounters many challenges throughout the text. Then they read Love Amalia, which goes back to family culture. And we get to see a Mexican-American character who learns about her culture and who loses her grandmother, which is part of her culture and her tradition. But again, it highlights who we are as individuals and highlights family and community. When they get to fifth grade, they read Wonder. And we needed them to read Wonder because there you meet Augie, who's struggling with a facial deformity, and he can't hide his face. This is who he is. And then how do you learn to live with who you are, love who you are? And how does that support courage and empathy? And then it really gives them like the premise that they need when they're going to enter middle school, which is like, how do you just learn to love yourself, which connects all the way back to Freckle Juice, believe it or not, right, in kindergarten. Then they read Garvey's Choice, another text by Nikki Grimes. And there you also see Garvey, who's struggling with acceptance by his father, who's a sports fanatic, but Garvey loves music. And then how does he face his father and his father's expectations of him? Then they read the last novel, which is also by Nikki Grimes, Jasmine's Notebook. And that one is near and dear to my heart, because we get to see Jasmine, who lives in Harlem, which is 1.6 miles away from where our kids are located. And they're able to see Jasmine's challenges. And she has an excerpt in the text where it says that you could still hear the sparrow's song, even through the blaring sounds of the city. And the same way you could hear the sparrow sing, you will also hear me. And we teach them journaling at that point and how they can use the journal as a way to capture everything and anything, their dreams, their feelings, and everything that they have, just like Jasmine did with her notebook. And these are all the novels that we want them to take with them when they walk away from Concourse Village, so that it gives them a foundation for them as an individual and how they can have an impact in society, but ultimately to learn to love yourself and to know that your current circumstances do not determine your outcome. And that we have our core values and everything that we need to be those coders, those lawyers, those judges, those engineers and scientists and anything else that we want to be. Because like Katie said, and I promise, everything you have is already here. That's all you need.
I want to thank our moderator for today's session, Dr. Ruby Boyd. Thank you so much for helping plan and deliver this great session. I want to especially thank our team from our America's Best Urban School Gold Award winner for 2020, Concourse Village Elementary School, and in particular, Principal Alexa Sorden, Assistant Principal Katuria Caceres, and second grade teacher Cindy Garcia. You are all amazing, and we're so thankful that you shared your time and expertise with us. As well, I want to thank you, our audience. We so much appreciate you taking the time to invest in this hour with us and to join us in learning more about how all of us can help ensure culturally, socially, and personally responsive education for all the students we have the privilege to serve. Thank you so much, and we hope that you stay tuned for our next webinar session. Have a great day.